Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Today's session will mostly be focused on discussion of this year's paper. Some of you may be just like starting the syllabus, so you may not understand everything. But please stay because it will basically help you familiarize with overall subjects also, what kind of questions you get. Some of these like at the start may actually seem difficult, but once you have gone through the syllabus you will find like not all of them are difficult, some of them are actually pretty simple. So that's what we are going to be looking at today, the 2025 geology optional paper analysis. I'm not sure, like it might take two classes to cover this particular part because there are many questions. I want to go through at least few of the questions one by one. It was overall a pretty balanced paper this year. Okay, so and I would say a little bit on the easier side. There, it doesn't mean all questions were easy, but compared to like some years in which they have indeed asked some difficult questions, so it was not there weren't like many bouncer questions this year that were asked. Okay, so the exam, as you know, like was held on Sunday, August 31, 2025. Okay, and it followed the standard UPSC pattern that we see every year with two papers, 1 and 2, and each paper had sections A and B, and overall you had to attempt only 5 questions. So each paper had 8 questions. So from 8 you had to attempt 5 questions for each paper. But out of those 5, it's not like you are free to choose any 5. Out of those, 2 are mandatory, and at least 1 from each section has to be attempted. So you cannot attempt all 3 questions. So after attempting the compulsory one, it's not that you can choose the remaining 3 just from one section. You have to choose 2 from one section and 1 from another section. So that's the only thing you have to keep in mind. But this also highlights that in one section you can actually leave after the attempting the compulsory question. You can actually leave 2 questions out of 3. So you have to attempt just 1. So that also plays a big part into the overall difficulty of the exam. If, for example, the questions that you can leave and the questions that you find difficult are all clubbed together, then it becomes easier. But if those questions that you have to, let's say you are not very sure about, they're evenly distributed between all 3 questions. So each question will have subparts. So we'll see that later on. Then it becomes a little bit hard. Overall, what does our analysis say? Our analysis say overall it was balanced coverage across the syllabus, as is usually the case. You will see from marks distribution as well. Usually it is very balanced marks distribution. Questions span all major areas of syllabus, ensuring no subject could be safely ignored. Okay, so that becomes hard, and also the mixing of questions. Sometimes all 3 parts will be put in same question, sometimes they don't, so it becomes hard to basically ignore any particular topics. Both fundamental topics, okay, continental drift, GPS, microfossils, phase, petrology, phase diagrams, etc., they were asked. And applied geology, example Delhi supergroup, Spiti basin, lead zinc deposits, they didn't ask KG basin, they asked Cambe. There was a mistake here. So Cambe Basin geology from petroleum deposits, that also was asked. Then there was weightage by subjects. Okay, so most of the subjects will be in this 60 to 70 marks category, which is usually the case. Okay, overall PYQs, okay, would have been very helpful, as there were several questions which were directly asked from PYQs. If you have gone through PYQs, you would have been able to answer some of those questions, especially, okay, even if you attempted like Indian Forest Services question, even from last year, last 2023 or 2022, I think, the Bilani formation question, it was a direct repeat. They asked on Spiti, which was also asked in the Forest Services exam. So PYQs, that is why it is very important. Okay, so it is very difficult to separate the Forest Services exam, Indian Forest Services exam, from the civil services exam, barring a few select topics which are only in Indian Forest Services but not in civil services. And overall competition level or the expectation is slightly lower. But if you look at the syllabus and the paper pattern and the type of questions, those are the same. I wouldn't say like similar, they are actually exactly same. If you just ignore that slight syllabus difference part. Okay. So PYQs would have been very, very helpful. The difficulty profile, marks, weighted difficulty. Okay, we assigned overall 1 easy, 2 medium, 3 hard, and we found it was actually less than medium, 1.5 on average for the whole paper. We felt paper 1 was slightly tougher than paper 2. Paper 2 was more straightforward. Again, assuming you have covered the syllabus equally, you have given enough time to both papers. Paper 2 was more straightforward. In paper 1, there were few specific questions which were not just the headline. Sometimes they will ask a question which is just the heading in your syllabus. So that is typically an easy question, but sometimes you have to dig deeper. So in structural geology, they ask some questions which you had to dig a little deeper. Overall, well-prepared student could expect a moderate paper with very few tricky concepts. Okay, not many. Overall attempt strategy would matter. As I said, also the distribution of questions. Where did they occur in only, let's say, just the all difficult occurred in the same subpart, or were they in different were they distributed equally in different subparts? What is the overall message? Okay, UPSC overall tested breadth plus depth. Okay, depth, I would say this time around was not a lot this time, but breadth is usually the most important aspect of syllabus, which you should always prioritize over depth. And we felt this way. I didn't say that there were no questions in which you have to go to a little bit depth. For example, they asked the sheath question in folds. Again, it is, I wouldn't say it is non-standard. It is standard, but you have to study folds in a little bit depth to really get to that. Similarly, for example, high pressure, high temperature metamorphism they asked. So maybe in which you have to go a little bit deeper. But considering that you also have choice in exam, you can leave some questions. So again, I would say overall breadth is much more important than depth. So it is more important to cover the syllabus than going too deep in any particular subject. Okay. Overall diagram, as usual, they sometimes explicitly asked to draw diagrams, or even if they were not asked, many questions diagrams were needed. Okay, so all grouped syllabus areas, diagrams based answers were basically quite common. And choice making skills, again, which questions you will choose to answer, those were also quite important. Okay, all right, any questions? We'll go into more details, but before that, are there any questions? All right, so this is the paper pattern, which is usually as always. Okay, so 8 questions in each paper. Each paper is divided into 2 sections, and the candidate has to attempt 5 questions in total, and 1 and 5 are compulsory. These include 5 subparts each, so A to E. So it is 5 into 10 marks. Okay, so 50 marks. Each question is of 50 marks. Okay, but 1 and 5 have 5 subparts. Each question is of 50 marks. Okay, remaining, so let's say 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 are also of 50 marks, but they have 3 subparts, usually 20 plus 15 plus 15. That is a distribution in these, from which you have to attempt only 3 of those. So there is quite a significant choice there. Okay, so, and then they will also usually specify the word limit. If you look at the distribution per subject, okay, so just the way, for example, these questions, okay, questions 1 and question 5, okay, have 5 subparts each, okay, and you have 3 subjects in each section. Okay, so when you get these 5 subparts A, B, C, D, E, they cannot be equally divided into 3 subjects. So usually it will be subject 1, subject 1, subject. They're not always in this sequence, but 2 subjects will get 2 questions, but 1 subject will get only 1 question. So that is why one of the subjects in each section will have slightly lower weightage. So that is why you will see in the overall marks distribution, some of the subjects which get 2 questions here will have 70 marks. Okay. From these questions, it is usually either it is distributed in each of those sections, or if one question covers one subject entirely, in those cases, it will be 50 marks plus 20 marks from here, or 50 plus 10. So that is why it will be 70 or 60. So this year, the subjects that made it to 70 marks are economic geology, Indian stratigraphy, mineralogy, mining, structural. Okay, so these made to 70 marks. There will be more because UPSC sometimes clubs subjects as well. So UPSC clubs, for example, metamorphic and igneous. So if you combine their marks, okay, so it will be from igneous petrology, it is 45, okay, and then from metamorphic petrology, it is 25. So if you add them together, so these and these together again will take you overall to that 70 marks, okay. So the ones that made it to 60 marks were geomorphology was actually combined with remote sensing, okay. So geomorphology, sometimes there can be an overlap. A question can be considered from geomorphology, but also other subject. And then paleontology, sedimentary petrology, these were like at 60 marks, because usually they will take igneous plus metamorphic combined to 70 marks. Okay. Based on our assignment of difficulty, we felt like several subjects were quite easy. General geology, for example, in paper 1 was pretty easy. They asked pretty standard questions like volcanoes. The syllabus says you have to study volcanoes and its products. And the question was, what are volcanoes and their products? So that is a super easy question. You cannot even ask such easy questions. Like even 10th standard students will get more difficult questions than these. Okay. So some of them were quite simple. Even in paleontology, overall, we felt the paper was quite simple, quite standard. So for example, they asked in general, what are microfossils? What are good conditions for preservation of fossils? So these are like introductory topics. They asked equidae, evolution of equidae, which is a directly mentioned topic in syllabus. So all of them were pretty standard questions. They didn't ask any invertebrates because invertebrates are not in syllabus, but sometimes UPSC forgets to look at syllabus. So for example, in the past, they have asked bivalves, pelecypods, sometimes like they've asked brachiopods in civil services. They are only in forest services. We felt like few of the subjects like structural geology, we felt this year was slightly a little bit on the harder end. Similarly, economic geology and mining geology, they could be considered a little bit on the harder end. And then mineralogy maybe a little bit, but also consider that you have choice in the exam, so you can strategize that. Overall, as I said, we felt paper 1 was slightly difficult than paper 2, but overall, if we consider 3 as the hardest and 2 as medium, so our score was, considering you have choice and you analyze difficulty of each question, it was a little bit less difficult than moderate. Again, assuming you have studied properly, you have studied PYQs and you have gone through the syllabus in breadth. I'm not even expecting depth. If you have gone through the syllabus in breadth and you have covered PYQs, this paper would have been a little bit on the easier end. Now, another thing that we analyze in each paper is questions that are directly picked from syllabus wording. Okay, so for example, there is a syllabus wording that says, so there is exact syllabus wording that says volcanoes and products. There is exact syllabus wording that says boundary problems in Indian stratigraphy, and they've given a list of boundary problems. Okay, so for example, Cretaceous, Paleogene. So if they ask you what is a boundary problem, what is boundary problem, write a note on Cretaceous, Paleogene boundary problem. That becomes a question that they directly pick the wording itself from syllabus. They didn't even go into any depth in that particular topic. Okay, there could be other topics as well, like evolutionary trends of equidae. So if you take these questions, you see 30% of the paper is actually made up of directly these kind of questions. Okay, so directly picking the wording from the syllabus itself. So if you have seen the syllabus, you see, oh, this is written in the syllabus and directly asked. Okay, so it is directly easy to map. All right. Similarly, meteorites and its types, those kind of things. Yes, Kaustav, thank you. And also, like this 30%, there are other questions also which are straightforward. It is not that only 30 questions were breadth covering. There are more questions which will be just based on breadth. It's the ones which basically even the wording is same. You don't even have to like look for wording anywhere else. Okay, so I will very quickly go through some questions. I will stick mostly on some important ones. Okay, so some important ones I may, for example, there was a question, there was just one numerical. Usually in geology, there are 1 to 3 numericals in a paper. This year they asked just one numerical. And that was from hydrogeology. And that was very, very standard and easy. That was straight from Darcy's law. Okay, straight from Darcy's law. Discuss position of asteroid belt, okay, within the solar system and comment on the composition of meteorites. So this meteorites composition part they ask, that is standard question. I will not go into details of this because they ask meteors almost every single year. Okay, so nothing new. Discuss on position of asteroid belt. So you have to say it is between Mars and Jupiter. So if you just mention that, that will fetch you some marks, but if you can give a reason also. Okay, so which I think that is why like we assigned a difficulty of 2, like medium. We didn't say like this is super easy question, because this for this reason, if you can mention that reason, it will give you basically maximum possible marks. Okay, you may lose some marks if you don't mention reason, and that the main reason is basically gravity of Jupiter. And early resonance, which increases basically velocity of some of those asteroids. So if you mention that planetesimal hypothesis were there, and then the planets grew from accretion, these asteroids never basically came together to form a planet, because if they are moving very fast, they just strike each other and shatter instead of connecting with each other by gravity. And once they shatter, they become into smaller pieces. Individual piece has less and less gravity. But overall, even if you mention just the word that the main reason is high gravity of Jupiter, that should be good enough. If you look just first two questions, you may thinking like, oh, this seems a little bit difficult. Sheath folds, for example, they asked. So if you have gone through the course, what we covered, we have already given definition of sheath folds and basic conditions under which they develop. So sheath folds, you know, the hinge line curves more than 90 degrees. It is like you see what is a sheath. As the name suggests, it's basically you say mayan in Hindi. Okay, you put like talwar, sword or knife in the mayan, so that is a sheath. So in a, it's like the hinge line, the line of maximum curvature is curved more than 90 degree. And overall, what is there? What are the conditions of forming? As you know, like because it is the hinge line is so curved, it is high strain. It has to be ductile, and that is true for any fold basically. So you can write in any fold that the deformation conditions should be ductile. Okay, and then there should be simple shear and rheological contrast. I will not go through 5. This is very standard. Again, this is the question which is picked directly from syllabus. And is a common PYQ. So this will be super easy. It will get marks 1. So if these get 2 or 3, okay, so maybe we can assign even 3. Even if you assign 3 to this question, okay, so and 2 to this question, this will in difficulty, this will turn out to be 1. GPS and its applications. Okay, if you open geology syllabus, it directly says GPS and its applications. Discuss the statement physical weathering adds effectiveness of chemical weathering. It is also not very difficult. It is pretty standard. They both aid one another. Physical weathering aids chemical weathering. Chemical weathering aids physical weathering. So how does physical weathering aid chemical weathering? The main keyword that should be there in your answer, and rest will be basically filler content, is increased surface area for chemical reactions. And then you can say basically what those processes are of general physical weathering which cause those which causes this increased surface area, which is basically breaking down of existing rock mass into smaller and smaller particles through processes like frost wedging, okay, overall maybe pressure release. So it's just standard processes of physical weathering that are there. You can enlist those processes and say they break down the rock into smaller pieces, and then that rock basically gets more surface area. In more surface area, more chemical reactions can occur, which speeds up the chemical reactions. And those chemical reactions can then start to make the rock weaker and weaker, and which again increases physical weathering, and that in physical weathering then again breaks it into smaller and smaller particles, and that basically cycle just enhances overall weathering process. So this question is from geomorphology. Again, we can classify it as, because it is maybe not very straightforward, if you want you can give it marks 2 in difficulty. Let's say it's a medium question. It will not be considered a difficult. You could consider easy or medium. Discuss the types of penetrative and non-penetrative lineations with suitable diagrams and genesis. So basically you have gone through types of lineations. You can write all types of lineations. You just have to split them into penetrative and non-penetrative. Again, even if you don't write the heading penetrative, non-penetrative, you just write the types of lineations, you will get some marks. Okay, but if you have split them, you will get maximum possible marks. So if you look for penetrative, it will be things like mineral lineation. Okay, it will be stretching lineation, the standard lineations, intersection, that the standard lineations that you study. So nothing special over there, and you study them in metamorphic petrology as well. It's not just you study them in igneous only. Okay, and then in non-penetrative, you can keep going with these. Non-penetrative, it will typically be silicon sides, which basically occur on the surface. They don't penetrate the rock fabric. So silicon sides, for example, only occur on fault surface. Silicon lines, grooves. And as I said, like even if you don't have a fully exhaustive list, Okay, it can still help you. It's not that you need 100% exhaustive list. Okay. One second. All right, so the next question is again directly, what do you understand by continental drift? Discuss various geological evidences for continental drift. This was super easy question. PYQ direct from syllabus, not just from syllabus wording. So this is direct from syllabus wording. So it will be easy one. Okay. This one, penetrative, no, non-penetrative, maybe you can assign 2 or 3 difficulty to this one. Geomorphic diversity is controlled by a number of endogenic, exogenic processes. This is like something that even a non-geology student can answer. If you're preparing for UPSC civil services, you have gone through geography at some point of time, even for your general studies preparation. And endogenic processes, exogenic processes, you already know about. Endogenic processes are basically intrinsic to the earth. These are processes which will build a landform initially. They will provide the initial relief. So you can say these provide the initial relief. And these include activities such as plate tectonics, volcanism, and you know the list overall. Okay. And then there are exogenic processes like weathering, erosion. So basically you can then list that endogenic processes. The general discussion of like overall geomorphic diversity is the diversity in geomorphic landforms, and you can basically give some examples also. Like endogenic processes can provide initial relief, and then rivers basically cut down that initial relief to give you geomorphic features such as valleys and hills. So those kind of things you have to write in this answer. Again, I would say like it is direct from syllabus, but it is not a difficult question as well. Even if you give it 2, that is fine. It will be like 1 or 2 question. Describe morphotectonic features characteristic of rejuvenation in a mountain terrain. So again, rejuvenation means as mountain terrains get older and older, in older terrains you already know mature rivers, what they will look like. Okay, so what your valleys will look like. But you start to get, for example, meandering river. Okay, if it is an old river. But if there is uplift again, rejuvenation means, let's say mountain belt becomes active again. So that meandering river then becomes basically present in a V-shaped deep valley. So those kind of morphological features is what they're asking in these processes. And you basically have to write points like nick points in a river profile, where the profile suddenly becomes steeper or gentler than its usual. River terraces are important because if you lift a river up and then it cuts down, so you form a terrace. Incised meanders, hanging valley, and then basically valleys width height ratio. Okay, mountain front sinuosity. If there is rejuvenation, the front of the mountain chain will be less irregular. It will be less sinus. Okay, so these kind of points you can write in these answers. Again, as I said, you don't have to write exact these points. There will be, maybe you have some additional points to write to these, or you miss some of these, that is fine. Okay, it's just like they want to see you are on the right track and you understand the concept and the question that has been asked. The more points you write, of course, the better. Waves are responsible for modifying coastal geomorphology. Discuss the statement with suitable examples and need diagrams. So if you have gone through coastal landforms and you know like what are the wave processes, overall the depositional and the erosional processes, and you write those landforms and those processes and things like longshore current, drift current, those kind of things, and you will be able to answer this question. Explain how remote sensing and GIS help in delineation of groundwater. If you've gone through applications of remote sensing and GIS, you should be able to answer this question. Okay. Let's assign like marks to medium. Let's say all these questions were medium. Remote sensing, and they didn't ask directly applications of remote sensing and GIS. I would have given it score 1 if they did that. Okay, let me see how much I did assign it in the first way. When I calculated the overall difficulty, I actually assigned it 3. So I was actually quite generous in my ranking. I said this was difficulty 3 because they are asked specifically about groundwater, but I still don't believe it is 3. Okay. I think it can be counted as a 2 or a at least a 2. Okay. But when I calculated the difficulties and generated these charts, you see I actually assigned it a difficulty 3. So I was actually very conservative in my approach. But it is you can think of like when you're discussing these groundwater zones, so you will see certain lineations, for example, drainage patterns, which you can observe, let's say from remote sensing, just from the sky. Basic lineations in hard rock terrains, the groundwater may only be found, for example, in fault zones. In certain areas, it may be arid landscape, or there may be basically thorny bushes and trees typical of, or plants typical of arid, and then you may get basically dense trees in certain areas. So vegetation can be important, which you can observe from remote sensing and can help you delineate zones of groundwater. And there are other things that you can see. Basically, you can see soil types from remote sensing. For bonus marks, you can give an example, okay, which is GRACE satellite. I think some of you may have already heard this name as your general studies preparation. Does anyone know what is this GRACE satellite? Yes, so it will be, that's why I say 3 or 2 question. GRACE is basically, it's NASA satellite which detects gravity changes due to groundwater basically presence. If you remove too much groundwater, you are removing mass, which will decrease gravity. So, and then you can write like more points. There isn't like a point where it ends, like there are only 6 or 5, 7 applications. So each answer will have certain variations. Various types of thrust geometries formed in compressional regime. Okay, so this one again, as I said, like could be a little bit hard. Maybe the previous one I should say difficulty, it should be 1 or 2 actually. This one I can put in 3, although it is also not a bouncer or out of syllabus question or very difficult. Different thrust geometries that you can basically write about is thick skinned versus thin skinned. Okay, or like simple ramp and flat geometry that you have. You can discuss about fault related thrusts or fault related folding. So general things about geometry of faults that you can basically discuss in these kind of questions. Okay, you can say duplexes and imbricates. Those kind of things. Okay, imprinted fan, imbricate fan. Okay, on the basis of dip isogons, describe classifications of folds with neat diagrams. So what are they asking here? This is a PYQ. It is not a direct syllabus wording. Classification of folds is there in syllabus, but they didn't ask dip isogons. But it is a very, very standard question. Okay, and usually it will be high scoring if you can draw the marks. I'll give it like ease 1. Yes, you're right. This is Ramsay's classification. Volcanoes and products, causes, products. Basically, your syllabus says what volcanoes, causes, products. Okay, and the question is volcanoes, causes, products. So you do not get an easier question than this. How does strain analysis help in understanding nature of rock deformation? Discuss some methods of estimation of 2D strain. So basically, because they asked a little bit about 2D strain, but we have already discussed methods of strain analysis. And this is also mentioned in the course, in the syllabus, that strain, how do you determine strain, but still you can assign it a difficulty of 2 or 3 just based on the fact that they specifically ask this: how does strain analysis help in understanding nature of rock deformation? If you have not very really thought about it, you may initially need a little bit of thought process what to write in here. It is not, there is not general standard answer for that. You have to write simple things like it helps in strain analysis, helps in quantifying deformation, it helps basically understand deformation history, okay, decode, or you can say decode deformation history, understand rock fabric. So those kind of things you can keep writing. For example, it can be input to geodynamic modeling. So you can keep writing points like that and then discuss the strain method. So there are many strain methods which we study basically generally as part of the course, and then you can write those strain methods for determining the strain of rocks. Not necessarily Mohr's circle strain ellipse method. It is for estimation, okay. So Dipayana, it is you don't have to write Mohr circle and strain analysis. There are certain method, okay. So for example, for 1D it will be, you can look at the fossils, and if the brittle fossil is broken, you can see what is the total length versus the length of individual pieces added together, and that ratio can give you strain. There is a R5 method. So like that, there are certain methods to determine strain, and you can use those methods. So that's what you have to write. Favorable conditions for fossilization, it is a very standard question. Like you have to talk about sedimentation rate. It should not be very fast or very slow. There should be reducing conditions which are good for fossilization. The energy of the environment should not be very fast because it will break the fossils. Usually fossil preservation is best underwater. Terrestrial preservation is poor. So those kind of things you have to discuss here, which is you study as this as the first lecture in paleontology. Different concepts of biozonation with neat diagrams, very standard questions, okay. So range zone, taxon zone, assemblage zone, all those kind of things. It is a very standard question, studied both in paleontology as well as in stratigraphy. This is repeat PYQ, okay. So this is repeat PYQ. I think it was asked in forest services exam, and we had basically already discussed this in the class, okay, in the value addition course, if you are all in there, okay. So overall type locality is Lesser Himalaya, Northwest India. The question that was asked last time was lithostratigraphy, paleo environment, and age of the Bellini formation, and they asked this again. It was a direct repeat question, and this is directly from your notes, okay. And basically what is the paleo environment? This time also they asked about overall the deposition. Instead of paleo environment, they said depositional environment, okay. They didn't ask type locality last time, but we had given already. That is something, if you know, you should answer even if it is asked or did not ask, okay. And also in this topic that you'll see, as I said, what is mentioned on the syllabus in the right hand side is the direct wording from the syllabus, what component of the syllabus that it is asking from. So you can see like subtopic that this asked from. So this was from modes of preservation of fossil, classification of stratigraphy, sequence biostratigraphy. So that is where it is in biostratigraphy they asked. And here it is not directly mentioned by words. So if you look at some of the questions that are that I said, they directly picked from syllabus, GPS and its application. So you see that subtopic says this, and it is directly picked from the syllabus. Engineering properties of marble, sandstone, granite, Okay, useful as building stones in engineering geology. So rocks as construction material. So that is where they have picked it from. It is from hydrogeology and engineering geology, which is mentioned as heading in your syllabus, is actually a combination of two different subjects, hydrogeology and engineering geology. So it is from engineering geology and from the topic rocks as construction material. So you have to mention standard things, what you will look for a rock in a building material. And those standard things would be simple things like the most important is strength, but other things as well, for example, workability, okay, porosity, permeability, okay, and then even things like you can overall resistance to weathering, you can write those particular topics. So there are other things that you can mention in this particular topic. Aesthetics, okay, how easy is it to cut, so that will come under workability itself, okay, and you can also mention some limitations in this. So for example, between these they asked about marble could be susceptible to weathering, it is a little bit softer, it has high strength but it can be soft to scratching, so it can be scratched, for example. Sandstone, it will be harder than marble, but in sandstone there is a possibility that it could have higher porosity, okay. Granite could have a limitation that it could be a little bit hard to work with, okay, to cut and work with. So you can mention one limitation as well if you want. Explain different genetics types of water and their significance in supply. So there is, for example, meteoric water, which is basically your rainwater and that is circulating through groundwater, but there is also connate, juvenile. And if you can ask, if you want to add, you can add like water like glacier, etc., those kind of things as well to it. But overall you can add fossil water. In most of these cases they are rarely or never used. Juvenile is basically rarely or never used. Fossil water may be sometimes used in Sahara desert, for example. There is no water now. If it is not saline, it is okay to drink. It is old water that is present in rocks but is not actively recharged, so it may be used. But connate water is also, it can be usually very saline, it is not commonly used. Glacier water, meteoric water is the one that is used. So you have to mention those kind of things here. It is a 10 marker question overall. You don't need to write like 3 or 4 pages on it. One and a half pages will be enough. Evolution of horse, okay, and its migration, very standard topic directly from syllabus. Evolutionary trends in hominidae, equidae, proboscidae, so directly mentioned in the syllabus, so nothing deep you have to go. Lithostratigraphy and classification of Delhi supergroup, so basically distribution of Precambrian rocks in India, and comments on its economic significance. So on economics, you have to write overall stratigraphy, and you know basically those that are given in your course already. If you start from lower to top, so they have also asked sometimes in Rayola series in the past, Alvar. So if you have even gone through standard syllabus or PYQs, you would be able to answer these questions. And basically you have to mention that at the base it is Aravali group, super group, and above it you get post Delhi. And then these Ajabgarh, Alwar, Rayola, they can have their own equivalent somewhere. If you want to mention them, you can mention those topics as well. Overall, if you look at the Aravali group, that is where you find most of the lead, zinc, copper mineralization. But if you talk specifically about Delhi supergroup, the important thing is copper Khetri belt. But other than that, there could be some deposits of asbestos, talc, wollastonite. Okay, but you can, barite is like, yeah, you can find there, but it is like a standard example of Kodappa. And you can write like those simple examples of mineral deposits that are found in Aravali, this Delhi supergroup. What are different types of wells used for extraction of groundwater? Okay, and why the well field should be protected. Overall, basically to manage groundwater, they should be protected. And types of wells and problems in management of groundwater. So types of wells is directly asked in the syllabus. So it will be again an easy to medium question. What do you understand by boundary problems in stratigraphy? Discuss Cretaceous Paleogene boundary, giving Indian examples. almost every year they ask Indian example of these boundaries. And overall, basically, again, I'll not go through this because it is directly major boundary problems and Cretaceous Tertiary or Cretaceous Paleogene as it is commonly known. It is a directly picked wording from the syllabus itself. So it will count as an easy example. It will be like score 1 kind of question. What are important groups of microfossils? Add a note on their distribution and significance. Different kinds of microfossils, applications of microfossils. So overall, this different kinds directly mentioned in the syllabus. So once you open paleontology and you start the chapter on these, you will start this on microfossils. So 1 to 2 difficulty. Okay. What is earthquake resistant site selection needed? Discuss geological considerations required for earthquake resistant structure. So again, directly mentioned in earthquake resistant structure part, but here you can mention things, simple things, like you have to do ground investigation to see where is the water table. Okay, you don't want to build earthquake resistant structures in water saturated ground. Hard rock is more important than let's say soft alluvium because they can undergo liquefaction. So if you can attach your structure directly to the hard rock substrate, that is always preferable. What is the distance from possible epicenter? Are you like are you exactly along an active seismic belt, or are you a little bit far away from it? So you don't have to be super strict in your criteria. So those kind of things you have to mention here is also like a standard question. Relationship between porosity and permeability, hydraulic conductivity, how are they important in groundwater movement? So there was a question. Let's go through the question. First of all, we can solve that. And then maybe tomorrow we will go through paper 2 analysis in the next class. So this is the question. A sediment sample with a cross-sectional area is tested with a permeameter of length is 30 centimeter. Water flows at rate of 0.8 meter cube per second. Head difference is 20 centimeter. How do you calculate hydraulic conductivity? So you have to use Darcy's law directly. Q equals to K A delta H by change in basically head 2 minus head 1. So you can write H1 minus H2 by L. And Q is given to you. Just keep in mind what the units are. Okay, so Q is 0.08 meter cubes per second. K you have to calculate. Area is 0.02 meters square. And H1 minus H2 is 20. Everything else is in meters. So you can convert 20 centimeter into meter. But you'll see it is not really needed because they have also given length, that L is in centimeter, so that is 30 centimeter. So if you let's say do 0.01 here, 0.01 here, they will get cancelled, or you can say it is unitless, that centimeter gets cancelled. Okay, this meter square meter cube will get cancelled, and K will be equal to, so this will give you 4. Okay, so basically K will be equal to meters per second. So basically 6 meter per second. If I got that value in the exam, I will double check it because that is quite fast for groundwater or for hydraulic conductivity, 6 meters per second. If it is like 6 meters a month, a day, okay, that is a reasonable number. But just based on these values, this is what you will get, 6 meters per second. That is the answer for this question. Discuss interrelationship between porosity and permeability. So this is again an equation already given in your course. The relationship is usually positive, okay, and sometimes you can use a constant like c square to relate them, but it is not always 1-to-1. Permeability will generally be governed by connected porosity. If the porosity is isolated, it will not contribute to permeability. But also you can mention that generally coarser grain size gives bigger pore. So if the grain size or the pore size is bigger but overall porosity is same, the permeability will be higher. Overall, how are they important in groundwater movement? They are very important. Porosity provides storage, and then permeability provides the flow part. Okay, so the flow is governed by permeability and the storage is governed by porosity. And permeability, basically groundwater flow within the aquifer is governed by permeability, but also from aquifer to your well, that is also governed by permeability. And the topic from which they have asked: porosity, permeability, hydraulic conductivity, transmissivity, and storage coefficient. So they asked these questions in the exam. Describe important lower Gondwana fossils, are like very standard PYQ. If you have gone through this PYQ, so for example, I had one copy over here, lower Gondwana flora and its significance. So 2017, directly they didn't even ask Gondwana flora, specifically lower Gondwana flora and its significance. So you can go through that particular part. It's like quite simple. You just have to write Glossopteris, okay, and other examples from lower. Discuss lithology, fossil content, age of Paleozoic sequence of Spiti Basin of Himachal Pradesh. It is also a standard question. So stratigraphy of Spiti, we generally study it as standard, and they asked it in like, this is also a PYQ, so that makes it even easier. So when you study Paleozoic of India, you study Paleozoic in Kashmir, Paleozoic in Spiti, and you also study those Mesozoic sequences, not just Paleozoic. So they asked Paleozoic. So if you've gone through your stratigraphy course standard, okay, you should be, it is already there in your notes, directly in this form in which they have asked. Okay, so you don't need to apply your brain too much. Okay, so that's all for paper 1. In the next class, we will go through paper 2 analysis. Any questions?
Sir, slightly off topic. Sir, 30th and 31st August ki lecture, sir, I was unable to access them on the portal. In the value addition folder that I checked, I think the uploaded lectures are the old ones.
There are old ones, but at the end, I think there should be new ones. Let me check. Just give me 1 second. Okay, mineralogy. Okay, I get your point. I thought I uploaded them. Somehow it didn't go through. The last one is this one, right? Yes. Okay, these are all. Okay, I'll upload those again. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so those were related to PYQ solutions, right? Okay, all right. So that's all for today. Any questions?